Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. So we're going to continue with the story in regards to the delegations that were coming to see Muhammad sallam. And we mentioned last week that those delegations will come throughout a whole period of time. The way that the scholars like to present it is that in the Seerah they will bring all of the delegation stories together to kind of give you an understanding of how Muhammad sallam dealt with each different types of tribes with a different set of rulings. Because remember, the revelation is not complete yet. So the revelation is being revealed whilst Muhammad sallam has his prophethood for a 22, 23-year period. So certain rules will be addressed to some of the delegations. Somebody had asked me a question about, there was a discussion about, they talked about the 5 pillars, but Hajj wasn't included. And that's because Hajj was not made obligatory because this was done before the conquest of Makkah. And so things like this that is important to clarify. So another story that was important is, so one thing you find, if you ever look at the map of the south of the sort of Arabian Peninsula, in the north you have Syria, Palestine, Jordan, etc. This is what they call the area of Al-Sham. Then to the east of that, to the northern east part of it, was what you know as Iran, was known then as Persia. Now down to the south is what we have Yemen, and then down to the west side of that, of the Arabian Peninsula, is what you now know as Ethiopia, which is at that time was called Abyssinia. So it's good to know those regions. The reason why I say that is because when the delegations were coming, for the vast majority of the dawah that was done after the conquest of Makkah, Muhammad sallam had the support of many of the tribes within the Arabian Peninsula. So a lot of people had already supported Muhammad sallam. And now what was happening was, because of the growth and the strength of the Muslims, and the change of attitude. So there's one thing I want to make very clear here. Historically, we know that when a force, when a tribe and an army, when a leader comes into position, back in the days, they would enforce their strength and their power by the might of their army, the might of their, of their ideologies, and they would really just go through whichever land they want and take that. What was interesting about what Muhammad sallam had done, which was never seen before historically, was the way that he changed the mindsets. So rather than just force yourself all the way through to take over land, if you think about the Mongolians, for example, they just literally pillaged all the way through from the east through the west, took whatever they can by force and made people submit to them. Whereas what Muhammad sallam was doing was he exponentially increased the growth of Islam, because one was basically there is an army and a might. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Muhammad sallam victory when he had literally nothing. When you think about Battle of Badr, and you're talking about an army of 113 people versus 1,000, and yet he overcame them. And then the next battle of Hujr, and there was 1,000 Muslims, and there was an army of 4,000 or 5,000 of the Quraysh, and yet Muhammad sallam still overcame them. And then the Battle of the Trenches, where there was only 700 of them, because don't forget, many of the hypocrites, they walked away and left Muhammad sallam. And plus, internally within Medina, he was threatened by the Jews who were looking to overthrow him on the inside, and yet he was still being, he was opposed by 10,000 of the non-Muslims. So even in the face of adversity, you see Muhammad sallam still overcoming, and this is what gave people inadvertently the conviction about the fact that Muhammad sallam cannot just be a very strong and intelligent, powerful man, but he must have the force of God behind him. And we always say that, people, who can do great things, Maradona and the goal he scored, the hand of God, but people always say there's God behind this. And so Muhammad sallam proved that point that it was. The second, probably the most important thing was the way that he really promoted Islam, the way he sold Islam, the way he gave that dawah, the way he prepared almost effectively the Sahabi who were like the salesmen of Islam, and how they pushed that dawah through, the way he taught them hikmah, the way to deal with situations. Even, for example, it was unheard of if if you would capture a tribe and you take over their land, one of the greatest income of that war is that you take everyone as slaves and you sell them on, or you wait for somebody to ransom them to make your money. But Muhammad ﷺ would capture a whole tribe and literally just release them. Just literally just release them out of mercy, and these tribes will convert. So in effect, what was happening was, over a period of time, people began to hear about this religion of Islam, this new way of life, this new equality, this new morality that it brought. And people were sick and tired of looking over their own shoulder in their own tribes, because that's what it used to be like. They couldn't send out their families literally down the road without them being kidnapped, without them being pillaged. They have to be on guard continuously in their own communities because of some argument they've had with another tribe. There could be two youngsters who had a big fight, one got killed, and for the next 20 to 100 years, they'll be continuously on guard because they will be coming in massive numbers to come and kill them and take in warfare, and not just pillage, rape, take everyone's slave, take their money, the whole, and that's what it used to be like. And the fact that Muhammad ﷺ was pushing this ideology, people loved it. It's like the differences just disappeared. And so that's why the growth of Islam was huge. So now we'll be talking about these delegations after the Fatah Makkah, after Muhammad took the control of Makkah. It wasn't the people internally in Arabia that were coming to them. They had already, most of them, converted, and most of them already had made deals with Muhammad ﷺ. It was now from Syria, it was now from Persia, it was now from Abyssinia, and it's now from Yemen that people were coming and they were hearing about Islam. Now, some of these stories are about the people that coming from Yemen, okay, from the southern region. And what was interesting, in the very early days when we used to do the Seerah, we talked about a whole stew of kings, what they call turbans, who ran and controlled Yemen. Now, Yemen was continuously being controlled either by Christians or Jews or the polytheists, and there was continuous battle. Whichever king that came into power, he would either establish Christianity with the support of the Abyssinians, or they would establish the rules of the fire worshippers from the Persians, or from the Roman Empire, again the Christianity. So they'll be continue switching. But in the early days, we're talking about hundreds of years before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we talked about the stories about how these turbans came across the knowledge about the coming of a prophet. So they are well aware of the fact that Muhammad ﷺ is about to come. And they used to have these two individuals that used to be the soothsayers, who used to always give them predictions and tell them that your leadership and your control of your kingdom will be gone, because there will be a new man that will come and he will reign with morality and goodness and kindness. So they're well aware of this. So I wanted to cover some of these stories about some of these people that came from Yemen. So starting with one of the Sahabi was a man by the name of Jarir bin Abd'Allah. Now, Jarir came so every one of them had the same form. They come and they either come in a delegation or they come on their own. So they are either leaders themselves or they come with a delegation and they come to see Muhammad ﷺ. Now, Medina at this time was busy because people were coming left, right, and center. And we talked about how Muhammad ﷺ in Medina now set up camps all over the place because people were coming from different places to take allegiance to Islam, or they wanted to make an agreement as al-dhimmi. Al-dhimmi means as non-Muslims under their state, they will pay a jizya tax, etc. So it'd be either one of the two. So Jarir bin Abdullah comes into Medina, parks up his camel, and he, as always, when they come to see Muhammad ﷺ, now with Jarir, he had an intention to become a Muslim. The dawah of Islam became so strong that he had a very strong inclination to become Muslim. And seeing the Prophet and knowing what he was like and his personality, they want to present themselves in the best form. So he parks his camel, he takes out his new clothes, ceremonial clothes. It's the clothes that they used to wear when they used to go see other kings and other leaders. And they put their ceremonial clothes and they walk in and they come to see Muhammad ﷺ. As he walks into a masjid packed with people. Here's Muhammad ﷺ standing there and everyone's sitting. The moment this man walks in, all the heads turn and they look in his direction and it goes silent. So Jarir's feeling a bit uncomfortable. And he says to one of the Muslims there, Ya Abdullah, has something happened? have they been talking about me by any chance? Because obviously, why else would they be looking at me? They said, he said, yeah. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ just mentioned that the next man to walk into this room is a man of piety, honor, and has a face of authority. And you are that person. So immediately Jarir felt, overwhelmed by the fact that Imam Muhammad ﷺ was referring to him before he's even met him. So when he walks in, Muhammad ﷺ says to Jarir, come inside and sit with me. And he says to Jarir, now they've never met before, but he's had revelation now that the next man coming in is going to be a man of piety and goodness. He said, Jarir, why have you come? And he says to him, I have come because I want to embrace Islam. I've heard about the deen, the dawah that's been going on, the challenges that you've had, and I'm immensely impressed by what's happened, and just even the ideas of that you promote. So Muhammad ﷺ says to him that, may Allah give you blessings and guide you. And then he asks him to take the Shahada. And so this man, he ends up taking this Shahada from Muhammad ﷺ. Now, Jarir says to Muhammad ﷺ that I want to accept Islam from your hands, okay? And I want you to give me some, I want you to give me guidance, and I want you to give me some sort of, indication of guidance that I can give to my own people. So Muhammad ﷺ gave him all of this in preparation so that he can go back to his own people in Yemen to give dawah. Now, what was interesting about this situation was when he became Muslim, Muhammad ﷺ says to Jarir, will you do away with me? Will you do away for me this area called Dhu Khalasa? Okay, now Dhu Khalasa is basically it's a temple in Yemen. There's a big history about this, right? About the Yemenis never liked the fact that all the polytheists used to come to Makkah to do their Hajj. So historically, they used to always build their own temples, whether it was a church, whether it was a temple of idols. They used to always try to take business away from Makkah. So he said, will you do away for me this place called Dhu Khalasa? And he said, but this is the place where the tribes come to worship their idols. He said, yes, and you need to remove this for me. And so he said, I have no problem. So they used to call this place the Southern Kaba. So the people at the time, the Kaba in Makkah used to be called the Northern Kaba, and they used to refer to this as the Southern Kaba. So they used to be split. Sometimes people used to go to both. So Jarir takes a group of his own men, 150, that shows dedication. He takes 150 men, and they go there and they completely destroy the temple. They don't kill anyone. They don't do that. They just go and destroy, because this land is now going to implement Islam, and there cannot be any more idol worshipping. Allah has already revealed the ayah of the verses in regards to now the idols that should be destroyed and removed from this land to change people's way of thinking. He sends back a messenger back to Muhammad ﷺ and says to them to give the message that we have now destroyed it. And Muhammad ﷺ bestowed his blessings on him and his army over 5 times. And to get a blessing from Muhammad ﷺ is a huge thing. It's almost like a ticket that you're gonna, it's gonna allow you to get through the back doors into paradise. So Jarir had, this is one of the indications of how a delegation that comes from Yemen had, without any arguments, without any debate, had already had learned about the deen and embraced Islam. And immediately Muhammad ﷺ gave him leadership and then asked him to do one job to show his commitment, and he had done that job. And from destroying that temple, then the implementation of Islam amongst the people became much easier. Another story was the story of a man by the name of Wail bin Hujr. Now, Wail bin Hujr, he was from a place called Hadramaut. Hadramaut was also from Yemen. Okay. Again, Muhammad ﷺ, he's sitting there and he says to the people, the man that's going to come now into this masjid, all the Muslims are sitting there, he is a man from a lineage of kings, Tubbans, okay, from Yemen. And he is a man of nobility. So this man enters in, and Muhammad Sallam asks Wa'il to come forward. He sits close to Muhammad Sallam, and Muhammad Sallam takes a cloak and puts it upon him. And he says, "Oh Allah, bless Wa'il and his sons and his sons' sons," meaning his progeny. Bless this whole ancestor of his progeny and his generations that to come. And the reason why, because inshallah he will embrace Islam. And he gave this indication. He also gave the hadith he gave this advice to the Sahabi, that when a man of nobility comes to you, show him respect for nobility as well. Not because of his position, but purely for the sake of Islam, for the fact that what you're trying to do is, Islam is encompassing. We invite people into the deen and we do our best. And we don't try to say to people, "Oh yeah, so you're a big hotshot in your company just because you're over here now, you're a nobody." No, give them the respect that they're used to, because otherwise, when you try to bring them to Islam, it's too hard. When you try to take them off the peg, when they're used to something. This is why there is a ruling that when it comes to zakat, a portion of the alms, the zakat, can be used to spend on new Muslims, to keep them there and to encourage them moving towards Islam. Okay, so when he's sitting there, he says to Wa'il, "I'm going to write a letter," because now Wa'il wants to become Muslim in the area of Yemen. And it could be the fact that now many of these other tribes are coming from Yemen to see Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's seeing now Islam is spreading. There's no choice for them. But the other key thing is, there was a statement that was made hundreds of years ago before the birth of the Prophet, where they said, "You will not win. There will be only a last few kingdoms left and he will take control." So they were taught this by their families and by their leaders, that eventually it's going to come a point you're not going to beat him. So you're better to join him. So when he comes, he embraces Islam. So Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam writes him 3 documents and says, "Take this to 3 of your provinces. You will lead one province. The delegations of another area will lead another province, and one of the prince of another region will run that province." Yemen is quite a large area. So he agrees and he's content with that. So Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says to Muawiya bin Abu Sufyan. So if you don't know who, let me just remind. So Abu Sufyan was the father-in-law of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was one of the very last people who became Muslim. So when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was coming in to take control of Makkah and the people of Quraysh, he was the leader of the Quraysh who tried to fight back against Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And when he knew he had no choice, he, not unconditionally, I would say that he would, at the early stages, he forcefully became Muslim and he accepted it, until over time, Islam grew into his heart. Okay. It was his wife was the one that killed his uncle Hamza assassinated. Okay. So it is their son. Okay. Muawiya. Now Muawiya is a very good Muslim. Now he says to Muawiya, "You go with him. He will show you the land and the area. Okay. And you scout it out, because you will be collecting the money, the jizya, etc. from this area. So scout the place." So Hazrat Muawiya radiallahu anhu travels with this man Wa'il. Wa'il is on the camel and Muawiya is walking. Why? Because Wa'il is a king, right? He's a king and he's just become Muslim. And he's not used to having non-leaders, delegations, or senior level people be riding with him. So Muawiya understands this, he's been taught this, and so he's walking a very long distance with this man Wa'il. Muawiya eventually it's hot. His feet, he's got very thin sandals, and his feet is burning on the ground. And he looks at Wa'il and he says to him, "Let me ride on your camel with you." And Wa'il says to him, not in a horrible way, it is a custom of theirs. He said, "It is not befitting for someone like you or of your level to ride with a king like me." So then Hazrat Muawiya says to him, "Fine, then at least give me your shoes, because I'm walking." And Wa'il says to him, "Why don't you walk in the shadow of the camel to keep your feet cool?" You see, now it's very hard for people to change their mentality and their ideas. When you have people who can bring into Islam, this is the beautiful thing about the Seerah, what you learn is new people that come into Islam, non-Muslims, and even Muslims, right? There are many Muslims who are in our community who have learned nothing about the deen. They're not accustomed to certain things. They've got bad habits. They don't know certain things are haram. They don't know about free mixing, not doing this, eating. For example, I know personally people who come from Muslims from other countries that will come and, they will eat haram meat. They don't know. It's just their custom, right? For whatever reasons that they might have. They don't know. Okay, now you have two choices. You can slowly bring them and make them understand, or you can do the old classic Pakistani style and get out the strongest bamboo stick you can find, yeah, or size 9 bata chapla you got, and you can deal with it that way. But that is not the way that was done. So Hazrat Muawiya didn't argue, didn't say nothing, took all the journey the way. Much later, fast forward, after Muhammad passed away, if you remember, during the time of just before Hazrat Ali, during the time of Hazrat Uthman when he was Khalif, Hazrat Muawiya was made a leader of Syria, right? He was a governor, very senior level person, very senior. Now he's more senior than these people in Yemen, Wa'il, whatever, he's governor. He was actually, even at one point, Amir al-Mu'mineen as well, after Hazrat Umar, you referred him to. This delegation comes to where Hazrat Muawiya is now. And Hazrat Muawiya recognizes Wa'il. He calls him in. He sits him down right next to him, gives him gifts, food, everything. And normally people, now remember that Muawiya is a governor, he's a wali, a governor. And when people come in, when subjects come in, even then you show respect, they don't sit with him. He called this man and says, come sit with me. And then Hazrat Muawiya looks at Wa'il, he says, do you remember me? He says, yeah. He goes, do you remember what you said to me that time? Wa'il responded back, he goes, the love and the compassion this man Muawiya showed me, especially even after what I did, he goes, I prayed now that I wished I put him in front of me on the camel. You see how Islam teaches people the concept of love and compassion. We fight, we fight, tyranny with tyranny in this world, right? We have hatred, we fight with hatred. We don't show the opposite side. That is why it's key then in Islam that when you have a dispute with someone, you always find that the Sahabi used to always say to Ya Allah, if they have an argument with someone and they don't like them, they make a dua to Allah and they say to Allah, Ya Allah, put it in this man's heart to forgive me. You see how they reverse it, the reverse psychology. Put it in the heart of this man who I dislike so much and he dislikes me, put it in his heart to forgive me. So that when he forgives me, then I can be compassionate to him. You see the difference? And this does work. The problem is that we don't employ this methodology of try to reconcile our issues and our problems. You understand? So this is a very important element and story that you can learn. And so these Sahabis and people like Hazrat Muawiya, and they were considered like the second elite of the group. They had great culture, great training from our great Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and therefore they could teach this to the others. And not many of these people who were Sahabis, but they were like very far away Sahabis, because they didn't spend a lot of time with Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They learned many different things from the elite group of the Sahabi. The other story that I want to mention is the one that I didn't get to. I did start it off last week, but we had a lot of interruption. So this man, again, comes from a particular region in the south, and his name is Laqit bin Amr. So Laqit bin Amr now hears about Islam. Now, he's not coming because he's convinced. He's now coming because he's inquisitive about Islam and about the fact that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knows certain things that other people don't know about, not even the soothsayers. So Laqit now ends up coming to see Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he's with a friend of his. So what was interesting is, as Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in the masjid, and the whole of the Sahabi and the community is there, and Laqit is there standing with his friend, okay, Nahik. As he's standing there, Muhammad ﷺ says, the only reason I have been refraining from addressing you, so he's talking to everyone, the only reason I've been refraining from addressing you for the past 4 days was in order for you to listen. So it was in order to listen to you, what complaints and issues you have. Even a prophet can do that. Every day the Prophet would come, he would give them bayan, he would give them khutbah, he would give them lessons and whatever. Then in the last 4 days, he goes, I need to hear what you are feeling and what you are thinking as well. Is there any man among you that you were sent out by his people? Now remember, he's not just talking about people in Medina. He knows there's a whole bunch of delegations from everywhere. So you've all come from outside. Of course, you've got questions about Islam. I'm waiting. The people in Medina, they pretty much know everything, right? What they've been taught. But the people from the outside, I'm out of respect, I'm waiting for you. Do you have any issues or any questions? Then the people were talking to each other and they were saying, what is he saying? What is he on about? Then the Prophet said, what if a person is misled by what he tells himself? You mislead yourself. Or what if you were misled by your mate, your friend? Or what he told you was wrong? He said, I am not responsible. Am I not responsible for delivering the message? Listen carefully and you will live in the right way. So he's saying, everyone is talking to each other, advising each other. I have a duty upon all of you. It is fard upon me. That's the one thing I am accountable for, is to spread the message, to correct all of you. That is my job. So allow me to do this, because people aren't asking. So the people sat down. Now, Laqit is saying that we're standing up. And the moment everyone sat down and he's standing up on the side, he said, Muhammad ﷺ looked at me directly. Then I responded and I said to him, okay. He said, tell me something. What knowledge do you have about the al-ghaib? Al-ghaib means the unseen, right? Not of this dunya. So Muhammad ﷺ laughed. Muhammad ﷺ said, I know, as Laqit said it in the hadith, he says, I was trying to trip him up to see let's see what he doesn't know. And Muhammad ﷺ already knew this. He laughed, he smiled at him, and he says, okay, fine, you want to play this game? Let's do this, right? He said, there are five things that is kept secret with Allah and nobody will ever know. Number one, your death. Nobody knows when death will arrive. Every day you live is one day closer to your death. And everyone holds a number in their hand, but you don't know what that number is. That secret is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore you should be very cautious about this. Number two, life. Only Allah knows when the sperm is in the womb to produce life. So meaning that only Allah knows when a child will be born, when a new insan will come. None of you will know this until much later on. But Allah will know from the get-go. Number three, what tomorrow will bring in terms of your sustenance. You may think tomorrow I'm going to sell, 20,000 on my Bitcoin and I'm going to make this money. You don't know that. Because the next time you look, the market will probably just crash. You think tomorrow you got that interview and you're going to definitely get that job, because you know why? Because actually the hiring guy just happened to be your mate. Even that may not happen, because he may not even turn up to the job, because he might get hit by a bus, or he might lose his job, or he may not have the headcount anymore. Nobody can determine what's going to happen tomorrow and what rizq is going to come. That is why you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are not controlled. Once you understand this, you will humble yourself and you will then bring your knees down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number four, when heavy rain would fall. And that means when Allah will produce life in the ground, when the economy will do well for a people and a nation, and when severe drought will come that can destroy a whole world. These things are kept with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so then Laqit then says to Muhammad sallam, he said, O Messenger of God, you know that we are from a particular kind of people that doesn't give credit to a lot of other tribes. Tell us something that we can go away with and we can teach other people, something that no one really knows about. And now I'm going to read this detailed hadith about how Muhammad sallam explained what was going to happen through the whole process when the day will end. He said, you will continue as you are now for some time. Then your prophet will die. Again, you will continue as before for a time, and then the day of lamination will be sent, meaning the day of torment will be sent. By the life of your God, I swear every single thing on this earth will die, as well as the angels who are with your Lord. Every single angel will die as well. Now that is already explaining something, two things, right, about Allah when I think about this. Number one, Allah created angels, and angels can do nothing but worship and love Allah. Allah created insan, who he loves, and they have the choice to love Allah or to hate him and reject him. And we live in a dunya like this. When a Lord and something so powerful can create something like this, and he's devoid of any emotion, that statement that he will destroy everything on this earth, everything in this universe, and every single angel that he created will be dead. He's devoid of any emotion. Fear your God, then you now will respect him. When a God can do that to a creation that does nothing but wait and kill them all off, what does that tell you? Don't mess with this Lord. Don't mess with Allah. And then he went on to say, your Lord, the Almighty and the Glorious, will then pass over the earth alone. Nothing will exist. He'll pass over the earth over his throne. And then water, a flood will come from his throne. And by the life of your Lord, every single place on this earth where warriors, where the dead have fallen and been buried, will be split open, revealing them. The earth will split open, revealing them. The dead will be recreated from their head down, and each one will sit up straight. They'll be resurrected. Allah and the Glorious will ask them, what did you do concerning what each have done? And each one of them will reply, and they'll be in shock. Oh Allah, this day has only happened shortly before yesterday. Like, it's only like this has just happened now. What are you asking about? And from his knowledge of life, he will consider his death to have only been a recent event. He will not even know that he died like that. And we know that millions and millions of years will pass while you're down in the grave. And you will think that you just died yesterday when Allah will bring you back up. So Laqit said, I asked the Messenger of God, and now he's thinking as a rational person, he's thinking, how will Allah join us back together again when we're going to be scattered? Some of us are burnt. Some of our bodies have decayed. Some of the wind has blown the dust of our bodies away. Animals have eaten us up. How would he do this? He said, I remind you of such similar favors of Allah. You have looked down at the earth and found clods of soil, empty of life, especially in Arabia, completely dead, barren land, and said, it will never live again. You said that this land will never live again, you farmers. And then your Lord sends rain from the sky, and as soon as you look down again, you see the plants coming out. Allah can resurrect anything, even from the dead. And by the life of your Lord, it is easier for him to compound you from water than the plants from the earth. You're nothing to bring back to life. You shall emerge from your graves wherever you died, and you will look at him as he will look at you. And then he said to the Prophet ﷺ, how can that be? We are so many and we fill the land, millions and millions of us. And you're saying that God is just one and he can look at all of us at one time. And then Muhammad ﷺ said, because they don't understand, they're trying to understand God. The reason I'm saying this is the problem we have in today's society, and especially even with the Muslims as well, you have no idea how to perceive God. You have no understanding. That's what the kids are suffering today. They don't know. So if Allah is this, can he do this? And if he is that, can he not do this? And does he have this limitation? And if he's not able to do this, and so why doesn't he do that then? And if he is the God of mercy, why is there all goodness in this world? Why is there evil? Why does Allah allow this to happen and this and that? And he's asking the same questions we ask. He's saying, so he's looking at all of us. We are millions. How can, what if I walk into a room, can I look at all of you at the same time? No, I can look at you at each instance. But Allah looks at, he's like, I don't understand that. And so he's explaining to him this element of Allah. And he said, I refer to you as some of God's favors that are similar to that. The sun and the moon are a sign from him. You see them as small, and you can see them both up there. They see all of you at one instance. You know why? When he sees them, does the light of the moon not hit all of you? Does the rays of the sun not hit all of you? So if the sun is too busy looking at one, is the sun only point to that person? It goes to everyone. And if the sun can do that, and God created the sun and the moon, can your Lord not see all of you at the same time? So this is how Muhammad is challenging in their logic. I asked the messenger of God, what will our Lord do when we meet him? He replied, you will turn to him and you will show him your entire surface. Nothing of you shall remain hidden from you. You'll be naked in front of your Lord. You'll be completely humiliated and naked. Your Lord will take up a handful of water and splash it towards you. And I swear by the life of your Lord, not a drop of it will fail to strike the face of any one of you. It will fall upon the face of the Muslims like a fine white cloth, while it will lie upon that of the unbelievers like a black pitch. Now, what this is talking about is, remember, on the day of judgment, earth will be recreated. There is no sun, there is no moon, everything is gone, it's pitch black. The Muslims who have goodness in them and what they've done in the dunya, there will be nur and there will be a very bright light. But for the non-Muslims, it will be dark, it'll be pitch black. And they know where they are is in a very hostile territory, and it scares the wits out of them. So Allah is creating this fear already in them. Then your prophet will leave, as will the righteous. So the Prophet ﷺ will leave, and those who followed him will follow behind him. You will pass across a bridge of fire. And when one of you treads upon it, he will cry out in pain because of this, because of the suffering that you will get from that. And your Lord Almighty says, his time has come, and you will gaze out at the Al-Hawd. This is an area that the Prophet used to talk about on the Day of Judgment. He says, meet me at the Hawd. It's like a massive, big, beautiful well of water, because people will be thirsty, and the believers will go to him. They will flock to him there. And the messenger will go towards it, and burning with thirst, a sight such as you will never seen before. And by the life of your Lord, every time, and he's talking about now the non-believers, every time any one of you stretches forth his hand, there will fall a cup in your hand, which he will cleanse himself from the excrements and the urine and the filth, because you'll be so hot, you have no choice but to try to cool you, and you will take this dirt, this urine and this excrement, and the sun and the moon will be veiled over, and you will see neither of them. Laqit went on to say to the Prophet, what will we see? And he said, your sight will be as it is now. That will be when the sun rises on the day, when it will be brighter than the earth and appear face to face with the mountains. This talks about even potentially how the sun will use, we're talking about the day of judgment, sun loses its axis, and literally, you know, the concept they say that the sun will rise from the west, meaning it will throw itself out, and it will be so close to the earth. It will be scary, as you know, for people to see this. So I asked the Prophet of God, how will we be requited for our bad and for our good deeds? And this is again the hadith says, by tenfold the like for your good deeds. For every one good deed that you do, you will get 10 hasana for it. And by one bad deed, you will only get one. And that depends on Allah whether he forgives you. So we talked about this, that when you do good deeds, try to do the sunnah, because an obligation is something that excels your position on the Day of Judgment. but the sunnah is used as collateral against your sin. So on the day of judgment, when you are being accounted and you have sins on you, Allah will say to the angels, find any sunnah, optional good deeds that he's done, so I can use that to wipe his sin. So don't overlook the sunnah. And I don't mean there's just the sunnah prayers. Everything is sunnah. Smiling at someone is sunnah. Being kind to someone, helping someone. You see an old lady who needs help, stop, take her across the road. All of these things. Nav always tells me he's picking up rubbish from the floor. That is sunnah, because he's removing harm. Don't belittle these little things, because these will come back for you. And then he said, I asked the messenger of God, is it to be either paradise or hellfire? And he said, by the life of your God, hellfire has 7 gates. And the distance between each gate, he said, a rider would take 70 years to travel from one gate to the other. So if you imagine hell as a perimeter, 7 gates around it, and we're talking about a rider taking 70 years to get to it. Now, we don't know if there's a 70 years of earthly years or 70 years, meaning units, which in some scholars will say could mean that one unit is equivalent to 100,000 of your earthly years. That's how big the perimeter, right, of hellfire is. And then he went on to say, and paradise has 8 gates, any 2 doors of which, if you travel between them, the rider would take 70 years to travel between them. This is how large paradise is. Then I asked him, Messenger of God, on what on what will we look in paradise? He replied, on rivers of purified honey and on rivers of goblets that give neither headache nor regret, meaning wine and alcohol that will have all the impurities taken away from it. And you will have fruits that will never go moldy, will never rot. And by the life of your God, by the life of your God, along with you, do not yet know that other alike fine things. There are so many other things that even Prophet does not know, that he's saying that you will find there. And there will be spouses for you, and you will be with your spouses. And one interesting thing is there will be no procreation. There'll be no more, obviously there'll be no children, as in you will not create children. Whoever's in paradise are those who took the test on this earth. Remember, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, he asked every single one of us, do you want to take the test on earth, or do you want to be like the angels? And we all, everyone that exists today, from the time of creation to Qiyamah, we all said we want to take the test, because Allah says the one who passes the test, their reward will be higher than the angels, because the angels will continue to do what they're doing. They will not have the freedom. And we all chose to be here. And then Allah wiped it from our memory. We don't know. We don't remember that conversation. But Allah says, I asked every one of you. I was fair. So Laqit then wanted to say, listen to this. He was astounded. He said, what shall I make my pledge to you that I will do? What pledge shall I do that I can do? And the Prophet said, spread forth. He said, once I put his hand forward, and he said, perform your salah, pay your zakat, do not worship anything else other than Allah, and don't make association. We have a problem with every one of these today. If that is the key to paradise, neither we pray. When it comes to giving zakat, we find a way not to give it. When it comes to association with gods, other idols, we look at everyone else in this dunya before we look to God for help, as if they're the ones who've got the power to change everything. And association with Allah, well, we do this every part of our day. We, in our social media, we look up to certain people. We want to be like him. We want to be like that. A football player, a boxer, a UFC fighter. We never put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where he should be. Now you tell me, do we have the keys to the paradise, or we don't have that key? And then Laqit continued and said, and will we have the control over everything between the east and the west? And the Prophet clenched his hand and stretched out his fingers, thinking that I was presenting it as a condition that maybe you will give me some of that. And he said, you will be able to travel over it wherever you wish, with never a man doing harm, except that you will do harm to yourself. You can travel wherever you want. When Islam is established, you can travel. The only person that can do harm to you is yourself. And that is it. We then left him, and he stated, and as they left, then Muhammad sallam, he said to the Sahabi, he said, those two I swear by the life of your Lord are the most pious of all, both in this world and the afterlife. One of the most interesting parts of this conversation was, which is the question that I get asked a lot, about what about those people before? What happens to them? Laqit proceeded to complete the hadith, and he said, I asked the Messenger of God, does any good people who may have done in the days of Jahiliyyah, before Islam, good people before Islam, does any of this count for them? Paradise, getting the reward. One of the Sahabi that was with Muhammad sallam and him responded to that, and he said, indeed, your father Laqit al-Muntafiq is in hellfire. Now, obviously, Laqit, being a newly convert, was quite offended by that statement. And he said, I felt a flush of embarrassment at what he has said about my father in front of everyone, saying that my father is like, it's an insult. And I was about to ask Muhammad sallam in front of everyone, well, what about your father then? Like a natural reaction. And then I realized that this is not the right way to speak to him. Another phrase will be better. And then I said to him, and your own family, Messenger of God, what about them? And Muhammad said, yes, my family too. I swear by God, every time you pass by the grave of a person of either Banu Amir or of the Quraysh, meaning the people that came before Muhammad or even the time before Muhammad was a prophet, whenever you pass their grave and they were an idol worshipper, you should say, Muhammad sent me to you to tell you of the harm that is coming to you. And you will be dragged on your face and stomach into the hellfire. And I asked the Messenger of God, what brought this about for them? They did not know why is it their fault? They did not know any better than what they were doing. Some of them thought that they were behaving in the righteous way. Very much like us Muslims today, we adopt traditions and cultures that are not coming from Islam, and we just think it's the right thing that we're doing. Look at Muhammad's response. He said, the reason is that God sent someone. He sent a prophet. And he implied at the end of 7 nations, 7 generations, and whoever disobeyed his prophet was going astray, while everyone who obeyed his prophet was rightfully guided. So this means no Muslim today has an excuse for what he does, which is not from Islam, when your Quran still exists, when your Hadith still exists. If you are doing something wrong and you have been told this is not the practice and you ignore it, this is Jahiliyyah. Prophet is saying to them, each one of them had a prophet, and the prophet taught them what was righteous, but they ignored. So the people that came before Muhammad, if you think about his parents and his grandfather and so forth, the religion of Hazrat Ismail was still in existence. We know that because the Hanifs are the people of pure monotheistic belief. They existed at that time, and they were telling them, this is wrong what you're doing, and they ignored them. Warqa bin Nufail, who's the cousin of Hazrat Khadija, radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, he was a monotheistic man. He believed in the oneness of God. And when he heard about Muhammad sallam being reached out by the angel Jarir, who Muhammad sallam at the time thought was maybe the devil, he said, no, this is the archangel of Gabriel that came to you. You are the chosen prophet. So it proves that there were people of piety, people of the Hanif, people of the oneness religion who were teaching them, but they chose to ignore. Now, masses is not an excuse, right? This is the excuse we use now. In Slough or in Birmingham or whichever town you live in, we're like, the whole of the Muslim community, the youth will say it. None of the youth pray. Everyone is smoking. Everyone is smoking drugs. Everyone is drinking. Everyone has a girlfriend. It's normal. And now what you've done is you've normalized it. And because you've normalized it, you've made it now part of your new religion. And because you've now made it part, you've now rejected the original one. And to reject the original religion means you rejected the prophet who came with that religion. Now think hard on that. You all claim you're Muslims. We all claim we're Muslims, but what part of that religion is still intact? When you look at your community today, which one of that is intact? Their salah is not intact. Salah is the key to paradise. That's the first criteria required to enter paradise, because without salah, some of them say that you're not even Muslim. And our community suffers with this. Our masjid should be 100 times, 2,000 times packed than what it normally is at Jummah. Zuhr is empty, Asr is empty, Fajr is obsolete almost. And it's not because, I'm not talking about those who pray at home, it's fine. I'm talking about those who don't even pray. So that is the challenge that we are coming across. So Laqit is being taught this very, very hard lesson by Prophet Muhammad, that the reality is very simple. The religion is clear. You have a life, you got to live it, you got to do the best that you can. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent every prophet down to each different nation, and you have an opportunity to follow that. If you choose not to, as Allah says, this life is a test. I created it as a test. You have the choice to follow what is right or what is wrong. I know what's going to happen in the end. I know which one of you are going to perish in hellfire, and I know which one of you are going to glorify in paradise. That doesn't mean that Allah is saying, I'm making you go to hell. He's saying, because I know what you're going to do, because he's not constrained by time or space or matter. He knows everything. So Jazakallah khair for that.